Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar on the Writers' Workshop. My name is Jill and I'll be hosting this event. I'd now like to introduce you to our presenter for today. Lynn Ord Uranyuk has been a classroom teacher, literacy coach and is now an assistant principal. She was first introduced to the Writers' Workshop model in 2005 and after her Master of Instructional Leadership in 2014, she has spent time researching evidence-based programs and working with staff in classrooms to implement writing programs that ignite passion in young writers, as well as explicitly teaching the skills and strategies they need to produce quality pieces of writing. We're really fortunate to have Lynn presenting today, so join me in welcoming her to the webinar. Thanks, Lynn, and over to you.
Hi, thanks everyone, and thanks for joining today. I really appreciate you giving your time out of your busy lives. And for the people who are not listening today but will listen in the future, thank you as well. I'd also like to thank the staff at Deer Park North Primary School, where I'm the assistant principal in charge of teaching and learning, for being on this today. But not only for that, because every day they bring the Writers' Workshop to life for our children in our school, and they do a magnificent job, always wanting to do better and learn. So thank you for being part of this today and also for what you do at school. And I'd also like to talk about some of the people that have really influenced me in bringing this today. And I sort of thought about a bowl of soup. And if the bowl would be a lady called Deb Sakana, who was a mentor of mine for years, and I learned so much from her, and I wouldn't be in the position talking to you today without her influence. If I was making pumpkin soup, the biggest influence in how to do the Writers' Workshop would be a lady called Lucy Colkins from Columbia University, and she's responsible for writing the units of study in writing that we use at our school. A part of the soup would be the stock, and that would be Carl Anderson, who is an amazing teacher and mentor for people learning to confer. And then the bowl and the other complements would be a lady called Jennifer Saravallo, whose writing strategies book is amazing, and it really does help with how you do all of this work day in, day out with your students. So looking at our first slide, this is just pretty much the focus of today, where the Writers' Workshop sits and what it can contribute to as far as a program that you can have in your school. We have the organisation and the resources that are really key. I sort of feel like the Writers' Workshop is an event, and there's so many components to the event, and if you get all of the components lining up, your workshops will sing. So organisation and resources will be discussed today. The structure, so important in the why, the what of writing. The need for consistency and keeping it simple will be threaded throughout, and also student agency and engagement, which is really why we do the work that we do. How they can be part of the learning, be engaged in the learning, and then through there they thrive as people and learners. We'll touch on the lesson structure, the writing process, conferring and small group explicit teaching. It's a huge topic, and I hope there'll be lots of questions. Just be mindful that the silliest question is the one not asked. Please ask the questions and I'll endeavour to answer them. If I don't have the answers, then I can certainly find out for you. So this is pretty much what we're going to cover today. But before we actually begin, I just wanted to do a little check-in. The check-in is pretty much where you're at right now. So for some of you, you're sitting there going, the Writers' Workshop is brand new. I don't really know much about it. Some of you might be sitting there thinking, well, I've done a little bit of the Writers' Workshop and I just want to learn a little bit more about the structure. Others might understand the structure and actually want to delve into the nuances of how we bring this all together. Wherever you are is absolutely perfect. And again, if you can listen from where you're at and what this can provide for you as a teacher of writing, I'm sure you'll find something in there for you. The bottom line is, if we want kids to write well, they need to write. And they need to be able to write a whole piece, not learn about a word, learn about a sentence, learn about a verb, learn about an adjective, learn about a full stop, and then try and bring them all together. The Writers' Workshop enables children to write and to learn about writing by writing. Carl Anderson says that a writer needs to have a process, needs to initiate writing and write well. And the Writers' Workshop really does allow for that to happen. Children learn the process of writing. They learn all the different ways that they can go about planning, about writing, about drafting, revision. and then they can work out one that works for them. They can initiate writing so that they want to write about, they might have something that's worrying them. They might want to write a letter to the newspaper or something. So they're initiating, they've got a purpose, they've got an audience, and then they'll choose the genre which actually fulfills their purpose. And in order to get our message across, you need to be able to write well, especially if you're wanting to, change somebody's opinion. Emotive language is really important. If you want to make someone cry, it's really important that you know the right words to choose. So all of that and the ability to write well is what's available in the Writers' Workshop. Okay, so this was my little check-in, just to make sure that everybody feels comfortable at where they're at in the journey. New to the concept, heard a little, want to know more about some of the components, and those of you who are quite well experienced it, I always say it's called listening for the gold, a piece that you may not have heard before, and how can I use that to stretch myself as a teacher as an offering to take your learning further. I think the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the building of our own professional knowledge. It gives us the opportunity to contribute to the kids, because really that's what we want to do. We want to make a difference. And it's through our building of our professional knowledge, like you're doing today, that we can offer that little bit of extra for our kids that will enhance their ability to write well, and most importantly, to love writing and want to write. So some of you may have questions about when we go through the Writers' Workshop, what do you do with word study? Where does read aloud fit? Shared reading, shared writing, interactive writing. They're all part of what we call a balanced literacy program, and they're all equally important. At my school, we have our word study sit outside the workshop, and the children will participate in 15 minutes, hopefully daily, of word study. Now, we all know we're busy and sometimes that's not a reality. Read aloud happens outside of our workshop time. However, the books that we choose for our read aloud may become our mentor texts as we're learning to write. Shared reading, shared writing could be the shared writing could be part of your share time. It might be part of your mini lesson, or again, it might sit outside. It's really about what your kids need and how you structure your week. Interactive writing, we use that as a standalone a lot. However, it's also, again, it could be part of the share time. It could be how you do your mini lesson. They're all important. Most time for us, they sit outside of our workshop time. The workshop time is quite tight. It's to get through everything you need to get through. So that's how we work it. But again, you need to look at your kids, your context, and work out what works for you. Okay, why do we do this work? Why do we set a structure of a workshop rather than lots of little lessons where children do writing tasks or maybe rotations and not a workshop? The workshop doesn't involve rotations. It basically involves children writing, and most of the time writing about what they choose to write about, maybe in a genre that you've chosen or maybe not. The children learn about what makes good writing. They really learn how to set goals for themselves. They learn the art of writing, and their student agency builds through that. I think the greatest gift, the Writers' Workshop, the children are writing about their lives often, their passions, their hopes, their dreams, and we actually get to know them as people through their writing. There's a little boy, Andy, I was conferencing with once, and he wrote a beautiful poem about trees. And at the end of the conference, I said, Andy, I really love this poem. I said, it's got, great word choice, great line breaks, etc. I said, it just feels like you don't love trees. I said, what do you love? And he said, oh, I love ants. And I nearly fell off my chair. However, that passion, I got to know Andy as a person through his writing. And he wrote the most amazing poem about ants because that's really what he was passionate about. And students through this framework I've seen learn to love writing. And if they love it, they'll write. And if they write, they'll improve and they'll make growth. And again, it's all about the growth that they make. It doesn't matter where they come into the Writers' Workshop, we're focused on their growth. And I've just got a little provocation. What would you add to the list? What would you say is possible? And for now, if you're new to the workshop, you might be able to answer that question at the end. For those of you more experienced, you might be sitting there going, well, actually, I would add this and that. So it's just really important that why we do it is it offers all of this, and especially student growth. Okay, so when I first started this work, we would do an open cycle where the children would gather a seed in their writer's notebook, unpack that seed, think about what genres they could use, and then select a genre, create a purpose, what would their message be, and then they would write. So in my class, I could have children doing information reports, I could have them doing poetry, whatever. I don't do that now since we've started to use the units of study in writing from Columbia University, and because it's for our context and our student experience. Currently, our students had limited experience in genre, and we really wanted to build up their understanding of genre. And we also wanted to make sure that each year the children built on from the genre from the year before. So how they introduce their opinion piece in year one might be with a question. And then in year three, it might be with a question or a provocation and some detail. So we wanted to build on. And so at my school, we do a genre study, 4 to 6 weeks. The children will generate their own topic, but they'll write in the genre that's been chosen. At the end of that cycle, we may, when we look at their post-writing samples, we may decide to do a little bit more because some of the essential learnings weren't met, and that might be up to 2 weeks. We then may go into an open cycle where the children choose their topic and then they choose the genre. Some might choose the genre that we've just studied, or they might choose a genre that they've studied earlier or maybe last year. Again, it's about context and experience. What we find at the moment is most of the time is spent with a genre. However, as our kids build up their toolkit, we believe we'll have more time for our open cycle. Okay, so now we'll get into really what it's all about. The structure of a workshop has a mini lesson, independent time, small group teaching, conferring, share time. And it has a time frame, and when you see connect 1 to 2 minutes, oh, how can I do that? Teaching part 3 to 6 minutes, oh, that's not enough time. As I go through this, and I'll give you some examples, hopefully you'll be able to see that it's the shortness of the time actually has the impact for the children. So the purpose of a mini lesson is to engage prior knowledge and connect to previous learning, which we all know is good teaching practice. And we need to bring them back to the learning from yesterday, back for the learning from last year. If it's starting a new opinion piece unit, you might refresh their memories from last year when they did this. It's a way of making sure that kids use their prior learning. I call it a backpack. It's like, you know, when you're in prep, you did this. We need to take that out of our backpack now, and we're going to use this for our learning today. Sometimes it's called a toolkit. Whatever you call it, whatever, the purpose is to make sure that kids are ready for their learning and that they actually know that they have got enough of what they need to start the new learning. The stretch part comes in the teaching. It might be new for them, but they've got something they can bring to that learning. So it's just a connect. So today I did a lesson with a 3-4. Yesterday, I know you were working on line breaks in your poetry, and you've also been working on repetition. Today, we're going to practice some of those, and we're going to actually learn a little bit about word choice. So remember, when you're writing your poetry today, and when I teach you this, you're going to be looking at starting a new piece, but all the things that we did yesterday about line breaks and from the day before, you're going to use that as well. Instantly they're, oh yeah, I remember that. Yep, we did that. And they're ready for that learning. The teaching part. This is the part where you're going to teach the children something. And the model that we've learnt at my school from the units of study in writing is it's one teaching point. And I reflect of my days gone by where I had lots of teachable moments, and no wonder the kids got confused. What are we actually doing today, Miss Ord? I'm not quite sure because I'd given them too much. So it's the learning intention and success criteria. Today you will, and this is what it looks like. It's really important that you go through the roles. So in this part, your role is to teach, the children's role is to watch. If you refer to the gradual release of responsibility model, it's the I do part. I do, you watch. And this is, later I talk about discipline, and the discipline really comes in here. Kids put up their hand and you go, oh yes, they've got something to contribute. And sometimes it's, you know, I once had a dog. And you think, oh, that's not really relevant. So we really need to make sure that we stick to the teaching point. Recently, I came across this, a friend sent it to me, and it was just a guideline for new content for kids. And I thought it was quite interesting as a thought. They're saying foundation to year 2, 5 to 8 minutes for new content. And it's from Keeping the Brain in Mind, 6 to 8, and you can see that on your screens. I won't go through. But it's just something to bear in mind. Sometimes we think, oh, I need to go over that, I need to go over that, I need to go over that, because we definitely want our kids to learn it. But for some, it's a little bit too much. So the mini lesson is your teaching. So today I'm going to teach you that when you write poetry, word choice is important. It's important because you want to get your message across. That's just an example of how I would start it. And we want to make sure that we're getting our teaching point across. And later in a few slides, you'll see there's some hints for keeping it mini, which I'll go through. Okay, the next part of the mini lesson is where the kids get to practice. It's the we do part of the gradual release of responsibility model. And it's a really short time to practice, and it's a critical time for you as a teacher. It's the time where when they're practicing, it might be through turn and talk or individually or a small group, however you want to set it up. That's the time where you go around and you do your detective work. So you're listening in for what the kids are saying. A misconception, a misunderstanding, a not really sure what to do, a piece of gold where a kid who's got it shares something, you think that's fantastic, I'll use that. So you're moving around the kids listening in. Sometimes you might have a bit of a chat with the kids. Sometimes you might voice over an instruction because you're noticing that most kids haven't got it. But how you use your time will dictate this. And at the end, everybody wants to share. And again, letting the kids know not everyone's going to share. They've all had a chance to share with Turn and Talk. That's why Turn and Talk's so successful. They've all had their voice. They've all had their turn. And then you may decide to repeat something that you heard. Oh, today when I was listening in, Johnny and Sarah were talking about their word choice, and Johnny had the word happy. And Sarah asked a great question, and she said, well, how were you really feeling, Johnny? And Johnny said, well, I wasn't happy. I was really excited. So Johnny decided that that's the word he would put in there. So it's a short little snippet of your teaching point that the kids have generated. And it's so much more powerful when the kids generate the teaching point than sometimes when we do it. So, or you might get Johnny and Jenny. You could do a quick little fishbowl. Let's have a listen to their conversation. Again, it's about thinking about how's my timing going? What's going to serve my purpose? How settled are my kids? The nature of the kids. Some of the kids may not want to share, so you'll make that decision yourself as a teacher. The link is the minute or so before the kids go off to their independent. And it's a chance to sometimes recap the lesson, go through the steps of the teaching, of the active engagement. But here's where you might lean in and change your voice and say, you know what, I can't believe we're about to write poetry. You're the most amazing poets. Let's go and let's create. And you really want to set the scene that they are ready to go. They've got everything they need, and send them off ready to go to their tables to write. And again, it's the you do part of the gradual release. You're sending them off to be successful, and how you know you'll be successful, and I've got it at the bottom of this slide, a little check-in. If children go and they don't say, what are we doing today? You know you've been successful. And I find through doing this work that the kids don't ask. They actually know what to do. Some of them might get stuck starting, but they do know what to do. And I'll talk a little bit about that more in a moment. Carl Anderson has some great advice for keeping the mini lesson mini. And it's really one or two examples will do. Don't use too many. He says a carefully chosen example that actually hits the learning attention will have the lesson work. Make your point and don't go over it too many times. Too many teachable moments can be overwhelming for children and it can confuse them. And when using a demonstration text, a mentor text, use a known book. We don't want the kids to have to unpack content, think about the story. We want them to know and love the story so that we can talk about the word choice, we can talk about the sentence, we can talk about the questions. And you don't need to read the whole book. That was a really great learning that I got from Carl. Don't read the whole book, just read the part that emphasises your teaching point. That's how you keep your mini lesson mini. Make sure you have everything you need. Again, that's the event management. Have I got the mentor text I'm using? Have I marked the spot? Have the kids all brought their writing to the floor if they're going to use their writing in the active engagement? Have they got mini whiteboards if they need that for the active engagement, whatever they need? Making sure it's all there ready to go. If you're in the active engagement and the kids have to go off and get something, your timing gets out. So again, it's that event management side, the organisation. And 8 to 12 minutes is your goal. And that'll help you keep that mini lesson mini. Often we go in our transitions from one part of the Writers' Workshop to another. And one thing I've learned over time is we have to consider those transitions. If the transitions from one to another have not been well set up, then it can create distraction for the learning. If children will come to you and say, I can't, what are you going to do? What I find is if you speak to them straight away, sometimes kids get the message, oh, that we can talk, and then they start talking and they actually don't go back to their work. So that's why I sort of thought of this 5-minute rule. No one's allowed to talk to me. Everyone has to go back to their table and they have to think. Peter Sullivan, who's a maths guru, talks about productive struggle. And I think this is that time for children, and it's only 5 minutes, for them to start to think and not go to that default of, I can't do this, I don't know, I'm not sure, this is too hard. So straight after the mini lesson, off they go. After 5 minutes, I might say, okay, if you're still not really sure what to do or you really can't get started today, come to the floor. And there I'll ask them, what is it that you can't get started with? What is it you didn't understand from the lesson today? Oh, sorry, what did you understand from the lesson today? And as they start to talk about what they understood, they actually start to see that they've got part of the lesson. And then you can say, well, you've actually got enough. I think you're right to go. Tell me what you're going to do. They'll tell you, and off they go. It's sort of like a weeding process. You need to work out the kids who really need you and the kids who probably need an engagement goal, who it's just a default for a little bit of avoidance time. And it could be that they just need a shorter goal of, you don't have to fill the whole page, we'll just put a little X after 5 lines, and if you write to there, then you can come and see me and we'll have a bit of a chat. And you need to know those kids who just need that bit of scaffold, because you want to get those kids the kids working so you can do your small group conferring. You can't do that if you've got children who need your support. So it's just a way of managing between the mini lesson and the independent, those children who, for whatever reason, need the teacher at that time. And if you do send them away for 5 minutes, they know that it's not forever and they know that you care and that you will see them. However, you're just also getting the kids who are ready to start learning settled. And it just, for me, I find it just gives me time to really make sure the kids are off and ready to go before I might need to do a little check-in, 5 minutes with those kids who just need that, and then I can get on with the business part of the lesson, which is independent writing time. Okay, this is why we do the Writers' Workshop, how we do the Writers' Workshop, and what's in the Writers' Workshop. And again, the structures come into place. And it says here you need structure, discipline, rigour, and to be well planned. And when I say rigour and discipline, it's those little moments where you've got one more conference to do and you might say, oh, you know what, I'll do that tomorrow. Well, tomorrow you'll have other kids to confer with. And that little bit of decision where you go, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, means that you might have 6 conferences tomorrow, not 5. And it's that little bit, okay, I'll do it now. So that little voice in your head comes into play a lot here. A writing station, and I've got a visual coming up in a slide of what that looks like. Paper, pens, revision strips, everything you need for learning so that the kids don't interrupt you. So it's like kids might need to see you because they feel sick or for whatever reason, but if it's for learning, you've set them up so well that they don't come to you. So that when you're conferring or doing small group teaching, they don't come to you. Now, of course, we will always have those situations where this doesn't work. However, if you really, really work on your routines at the start of the year and you are absolutely disciplined, you'll be amazed that those little interruptions just disappear. How are you going to read the kids' work? Are you going to read them before you go to the conference? Are you going to read them at the conference? What works for you? I find myself a quick little scan the night before gets me a bit of a feel for what I'm going to do when I'm conferring with kids. Or I might notice when I'm reading the work, oh, gee, there's 5 or 6 kids that have the same sort of need. I might then do a small group teach. And then that way, instead of 5 conferences on the same thing, I've hit 5 kids in a small group model. So again, all of this is about you, your kids, and the decisions you make for them. I will say that our kids don't write in books, and it's a deliberate decision. Our children choose different sorts of paper, and this all comes through the units of study and writing. And if you're sitting there going, what are you talking about, these units of study and writing? It's a program from Columbia University that has amazing teaching lessons for models, rubrics, checklists, how to bring this all together. And for us, it works beautifully. And so you've got all of that set up. Our children have their writing in the younger years, green and red folders. Now, unfortunately, we couldn't get green this year, so it's white and red, but it doesn't matter what colour, it's the purpose. So the children know from grade 1 that their writing in the green folder is what they're currently working on. And any writing that they've done throughout the year goes into their red folder. They might have stopped it for now. They may go back to it later. Our foundation students have a folder, but their writing's in the one folder. However, in 3 to 6, we've stopped using those and we've started to use folders, which I'll show you the picture of in a moment. So during this, the children are writing independently, or they may work with a buddy as they move through the writing process. So again, this is the conferring small group time, and your organisation needs to be in place so that the kids don't need you for learning about writing during this time. So that's a photo of our year 3 to 6 folders. So they've got a 4-ring binder with dividers, work for drafting. I love this, not at the moment. That's what they've called their red folder. Resources, we may have given them an extract from a poem, we may have a mentor text, we may have their strategies for their goals. Anything we've used throughout the year for their writing as a resource goes into that section, and then any of their published work goes in there as well. So that's a great structure for managing the kids' writing and also their independence during that time. And there's a photo of a year 1 writing station, glue sticks, pens, paper, everything the kids need, so that you're not conferring with a child and someone comes up, I need a glue stick. No, they know where the glue sticks are. So again, it's an organisational structure which has your lesson move and flow. Okay, conferring. And I do apologise if it feels rushed. There's a lot of content, but please make sure you're writing down your questions. Carl Anderson has a way of conferring. He confers and says it's a conversation about the work the child is doing as a writer and a conversation about how the child can become a better writer. And he has a bit of a mantra. He says, if you can confer with each child in your class 25 times in the year, and these are intentional and focused at the child's point of need, you will achieve a great deal. It sort of gives you a bit of breathing space, because one of the questions some of you are saying, how do you fit it all in? And if you have a conference with a child, you give them a goal, they need time to practice. So you're not expecting them in the next lesson to have that goal achieved. The goal needs to be a stretch goal. It's something that they need to work on over time. So they may have that goal for 1 week, 2 weeks. And we say to our children, if you feel like you've achieved your goal, come and see us, maybe during eating time or before school or whatever, and say, look, I think I've achieved my goal and here's my evidence. Now, this is not happening at the moment at our school. We're still working on that, but that's where we would like to head. And he's got a great book called How's It Going? And that's all about conferring. The units of study model that we use, when we confer, we use this. It's research. What is the child's writing and or conversation telling me about what I need to teach? So you might be reading their writing or having a conversation. Hi, Mary, can you tell me what you're writing about today? As they're talking, you're doing the research. What is it that they're saying that I might need to teach? You make a decision. What am I going to teach? That will have them stretched. Before you teach, it's a compliment. Say something the student's doing well. So it's sort of like, I love the way your lead got me straight into the story, and I like the way you chose action to start, and now I'm going to teach you this. There's no but, there's no, oh, straight into this is what, because sometimes children perceive it as what they're doing wrong. It's not, it's what you need, what I'm going to teach you next, your next stretch goal. So that's the way, complement, teach. And obviously, you need to evaluate their progress against that goal at some point. It might be a quick check-in the next day before, after that 5-minute time, just walk past Mary. You ready for your goal? You got everything you need? Just a little check-in. And then when you have another conference with Mary, it would be around that goal. That little model makes it quick and effective. Conferences shouldn't go for a really long time, and that's why sometimes we don't fit them all in. We're having a 10, 15-minute conference with a child. These sorts of conference could be 1 to 2, 3 minutes. We're fortunate with the units of study, they have a help desk built in, so it helps you to know what to say when you see children doing certain things. And I'll get onto that in the process a little bit later. So again, that professional knowledge, building that. So you might say, well, I actually don't know what to say when I see a child's writing. So you might need to have a look at it. Carl Anderson's got another book called Assessing Writing, and that might be, it's at the end of the slide, that might be somewhere to go. But be kind to yourself. Don't choose too many goals, just like our children. Pick one, work on that, and then once you feel like that's embedded, go on to your next goal. So it could be mini lesson, it could be conferring. Often people will ask me, where do you confer? Do you confer at a table? Again, it's really about choice. The reason why I confer at a table is because Carl Anderson had a great thing to say. Kids have got what they need, they feel valued. And if they're at a table, you could be having a one-on-one conversation, but Bob over the desk could, maybe tune in and may get something for himself. Lucy Calkins talks about that as well. It's an opportunity for kids to eavesdrop. So while you're targeting one child, another child may benefit. So that's what we do. Because I'm not in a classroom now, but if I was, I would get one of those little camping stools and carry that around with me so I can plonk next to the children, because at my age, getting down on my knees is a little bit tricky. Now, the biggest question is conferring. How do I record this? And again, I think I've tried 15 different things over the years. This one works for me. It may not work for you. We are in a digital age. I know people have used Evernote. There is an app called iDocio. I don't know if people still use that. My teachers have used that. It's just a way of recording your conversation and what you've told or what you've taught, so that when you see them the next time, you remember. It's nice to think we will remember our 25 kids and what we've told them. Chances are we won't. So this is a sample that I noticed about the student, what I taught. The volume of writing, so that was an engagement goal. Another one was not an information to write about. So we talked about visualizing, and I've got that example later on. So again, it's about talk to your colleagues. There's great groups on Facebook, and that's a bit later as well. Find out what other people are doing, try it, and if it works, use it. If it doesn't, try something else. Just because somebody says, oh, this is a good strategy, doesn't mean it works for you. This one worked for me. I found it simple. When I first started, I had a sheet of paper for every child. It was a nightmare. I would lose the pages. So again, work out what works for you. Share time. This is the last part of the workshop. And it's really the critical part. It's a bit like in maths when we do a reflection. It's sometimes the part where we miss. And again, that word discipline comes in. Please don't miss it. It's really important. But what it's not kids reading their work aloud without a purpose. Children may read their work aloud, but it's really around the teaching point. You may have noticed that a child's writing, actually, they experimented. If it was about word choice, they experimented, and they can talk about what they did. They may be part of the share time. In the units of study, most of the share times that are there can help us to connect to the mini lesson. It might be you're looking at a rubric or a checklist and from the kids' work today. So they're assessing their work. They might be doing a peer assessment. In the older years, sometimes it's wrapping up the lesson and then talking about what you want them to do at home. It could be the teacher talking. It could be the children. It could be turn and talk. It's important. And often I've found at this point, when the kids are sharing their work, what they did, what strategy they did, the other children remember that more than your teaching point. And they'll use that in the next lesson, probably more than your teaching point. They learn beautifully from each other. One, because often it's in language that they understand. So please don't skip it. And that's what the next slide is, alert, don't skip it. It's a really important time. And often I'll lean in and talk really quiet and say, this is the golden part of the lesson. This is where you're going to get something that you can take for tomorrow in our writers workshop. Okay, the process. So this is the how. This is around the cycle that the kids will work through. So while our mini lesson is about the teaching point, children will get to choose to use that on a current piece of writing, or they may start a new piece of writing. So it could be they have to go back to the ideas part of the cycle, or it could be that they're in the revision part of the cycle. It could be that they want to put that part in their published for when we have a writer's celebration at the end. So the children may be in different parts of the process. And again, as Carl Anderson said, they need to understand the process to then be able to work out a process that works for them. It's a bit like one of my colleagues once said, you need to learn about how to write before you can break the rules of writing, like starting a sentence with and, because we know that that can be really powerful, but you don't want to start there with kids because we want to position them so they understand the conventions of language before they can break those conventions. So the very first part of the process is our ideas. Writer's notebook. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this today. It's critical. It's wonderful. This is actually a photo from my writer's notebook that I have. I was fortunate enough to go hot air ballooning, and we were lucky enough to go to the MCG. So this was my seed that I shared with my children, because it's really important they see us writing. And if you're sitting there thinking, I can't write, you can. You just got to start, just like our kids. It's where they gather ideas. It might be in the writing process they go back and practice a few leads. It's really the essence of being a researcher. Writers observe the world. And if you've ever had an author come to your school, that's what they'll talk about. They observe the world. They watch what's going around. They might get a conversation. They might see something. And they have to have a part to record it. We haven't moved to electronic writer's notebooks. That's an option. Foundation in Year 1 at our school have a class writer's notebook. Years 2 to 6 have their own. And it's really a way. Now, we have an A4. I've seen smaller ones where the kids can take home. A lot of writers will have a small one in their handbag or their satchel or whatever. So we want to give the message that writers observe the world and they capture their thoughts either for today or another day. Planning. It's really interesting. The writing units of study, the planning strategies they have in there are the best I've ever seen. They build each year from what the children learn how to plan in foundation through to year 6. And the planning is embedded in the writing process. Before I use these, I would get the kids to do a plan and they'd start writing and I say, where's your plan? And they go, what? And the plan would be in their tub or wherever, not with them. And they didn't see the connection to the writing and the planning. The example you can see on your page here is a student sketching across pages. So the little picture up the top is the plan. And they've sketched their plan across all of their pages before they've written. So when they turn their page, they've got their plan, it sparks what they said. Now they may change their plan, but it's there. So they're not struggling to know what to write about. They know because it's there visually. They might plan across their fingers. Page 1, if it was a how-to book, how to make a Vegemite sandwich. Page 1, get the bread. Page 2 is going to be about spreading the Vegemite. Page 3 is about where you eat it. Page 4 is about eating it, whatever. Another example is a little bit higher. We don't do this with our preps. Our preps might plan across their hands. Our year 3s might take that concept of planning across their hands, but again, they've written it. And this way is about taking a big topic like Taekwondo and breaking it into the parts. So they're not going to talk about everything. So what they do at Taekwondo, how the uniform, etc., and they've got their plan. So when they do the information report, they know the topics. It also stops repeated information in information reports because they're well planned, and that plan is on top of where they write. So their writing would go underneath that plan. Another planning tool that we got from the units of study is through a contents page. So the children plan their information reports by making subheadings. This is an example of where the children took their subheading and then had to really think about what their chapter heading would be later on in the process. And I love this. This is from a year 3 boy. And his subheadings, he was writing about hair, and he's got knits, bleach, and colour cells. And then later on, the plan became those little buggers don't ruin me and I'm getting weaker. So it was a really creative way in the information report, but again, a really good way to plan for writing and from the units of study. So once the kids have planned, and if they plan well, the drafting is done quickly. What I find in the process is that children who don't plan, the drafting process is slow, and we don't want this part to be slow. This is about getting their ideas down. You may have heard of terms of fast writes, quick writes. They've done their plan. They want to do thinking as they're writing, but they're not labouring over this part. They're not getting to the end of the 4th line and going, oh, what am I going to write next? They actually know what they're going to write next. And they get that part done quite quickly, because the planning's really critical, and then the revision. So I'm not going to spend too much time on drafting. They just need to get the work done. And then we get to our revision. And this is where the kids learn about quality writing. This is what Carl Anderson talks about, writing well. I've broken down into a couple of genres, but this is what I generally find after a draft. And having this in mind helps you as a teacher plan for your conferring, plan for your mini lessons. You'll see things outside of this, we call them outliers, but generally this is what you'll see. Adding detail. The goal will be about adding detail. Slowing down during the important parts. And it might be the inside outside of a story. What's happening on the inside, what's to the character, what's happening on the outside. They haven't attended to that. Information, leaving out important details. And on the next page, I'll take you through a strategy for this, which is brilliant. It was one of the best I've seen. And it could be adding to because statements. The structure, so the child may have, the structure might be all over the place and there's no meaning. So you'll have some kids there. And then we got the other problem where there's too much detail, especially in a narrative. Got up, had breakfast, went down the stairs, got it, blah, 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 and it goes on and on and on. And it's like a list of things that they've done in the day. So they might need to go back to their plan or go back to their writer's notebook for that. Information, too much detail, information, opinion, you're looking for repeated information and arguments. They've just disguised it in a different way, but basically it's saying the same thing. So if you have that in mind before you go and confer, or you might get a small group from that, it helps you as a teacher to think, what would I be expecting my writers to show me? And then you can move to that next part. So this is the example I wanted to share with you, what I just love. This is a disengaged boy, grade 4, and he was writing about medievals, an information report. And we were having a conference and I noticed that he didn't have much detail. And his first draft, he had the medieval ages, they have stone walls surrounding the castle so the villagers don't get in. So we talked about it, and I said, well, you know, Aidan, part of being an information reporter is you're teaching somebody about something, and you're teaching your reader. Do you think you've given them enough information here to teach the reader? I mean, this is after I've done the compliment, etc. We're at the teaching part here. And he said, oh, well, yeah, but maybe. And so I said, could you close your eyes and get a picture of the castle for me? Just whatever. So he did. And he, you know, visualized. And at the end I said, can you write now what actually I said, can you tell me what you visualized? And part of what he told me is written here, which was amazing. I said, quick, go and write it before you forget it. So he's adding detail after this strategy was, stone walls have these 4-cylinder shapes, and at the top they go out like flowers. Amazing. That was my favourite. For the archer to see other kingdoms come to invade. The defending kingdom get an advantage at high ground. The castle has a flip up and down board because there's water surrounding the castle. So very simple strategy, and you can see that didn't take a lot of time. Now, I got that from the help desk in the units of study, so that's where my professional knowledge helped me because I knew what to say. And there. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, I would not know what to say, you will have someone in your school who will. Ask them, say, you know, you don't have to, if you're not sure what to say to a child, don't feel like you have to confer with them then and there. Say, look, I'm going to get back to you. I want to do a bit more thinking about this. Go and get some professional help because, you know, if you limited experience in this, you won't have those answers yet. And go and speak to a colleague. There is a Facebook group that I'm on with the units of study. Ask a question, people get back to you. So, you know, you don't feel like you have to have all the answers then and there, but the more you do this work, the more you have in your backpack. So while the kids have a backpack, you have a backpack as well. Another way that we revise is we don't, our kids don't rewrite drafts. It's a huge waste of their time and it's very laborious, especially for kids who struggle with their handwriting in the younger years. This is an example of a child who had edited their work. So instead of rewriting, you can see there's little strips of paper that have been stuck on top where they've added detail. And you can't see the whole picture, but it was very dark. So they were talking about being somewhere and they didn't have that and they added that detail. Another thing that we do sometimes is kids will cut their work, providing they haven't done back-to-back pages, and they insert another piece. You can see on the previous example that the child there had put a little arrow down to his adding. So again, we're not rewriting, we're either using strips, we're cutting pages and adding, or we're putting an arrow down. Whatever you're doing, those strips are on their writing station. So for kids wanting to revise, off they go and get those strips, the sticky tapes there, etc. They're not coming to you, I need a strip because I'm going to revise, when you're working with a group. Okay, sometimes they might work with a buddy. We have writing partners. Again, there's a lot of teaching that goes into how to give feedback peer-to-peer. We don't want the kids to go, it's really good, I liked it, because that gives them nothing. But because we use checklists and rubrics with our kids, they're starting to get the idea for themselves, and then from there they can share with others. It's early work for us, but it's certainly powerful work that we're moving towards. And again, learning from each other is really, really powerful. One thing I haven't mentioned throughout, which comes later in the slide, is anchor charts. Anything we do in our mini lesson or conferring, we have anchor charts around the room. I call them Teacher B. So I say to the kids, look, if I'm not available, you've got Teacher B all around the classroom. Go there. You've also got Teacher C, which is your peer, your writing buddy. You can go, say, excuse me, could I have a bit of time with you? And again, the kids are getting better at that. The proofreading and editing part, I think this was the best information I got on spelling from Carl Anderson. We're looking for, kids will make careless errors when they're drafting. We want their thinking to be on the writing, on the plan, on choosing that word that they actually don't know how to spell, but it's the best word for that piece. We don't want them thinking about spelling the words. I had a little boy once who was ASD, and he had a real problem with not being able to spell the words. So we came up with a system. I said, you don't have to spell the words, just put a line where that word goes, because I know you'll remember it, and just keep writing. So his first drafts were full of words he could spell and lines. And when he would reread it, he knew what the words were. But what I noticed over time was those lines started to disappear, and he started to have a go, because it took away that fear of mistakes. It took away that I have to get it right. And I think that's the message we want with our kids. We don't want them to be stifled through maybe not knowing to spell a word correctly. In fact, a child that spells every word correctly in a piece, in a draft, I'd be worried about them. And that's, Deb Sakana taught me that. Be worried about the kids that get everything right, because they're not taking risks. They're not choosing difficult words, especially in the younger years. So there's those careless errors. The kids will pick them up in their work. The second type of error is the error that shows growth. And again, it's the word that the child's choosing. It might be a multisyllabic word that they're having a go at. So use that as evidence of their thinking, not as an error. And you can say, wow, look at your thinking. I can see that you've got this spelling pattern in there. You've used that little word, and you've just got the ending that we're going to tweak. It's really important that kids get the message that spelling is important because it adds meaning, but if you can't spell the word right now, it has no impact on you as a writer. It's important, but it is not writing. And I just worry sometimes if we spend too much focus on the spelling too soon, it can stifle the kids' creativity and their sense of, I'll have a go. Publishing, the units of study really changed my mind on this. I used to teach year 2, and at the end of we'd publish their work, and I'd be busy typing. And what would happen is I'd spend so much time typing stories that I actually wasn't teaching. And really, I was doing the work and the kids weren't. And Kath Murdoch, who some of you all know in Inquiry, she always talks about the kids doing the heavy lifting. And if we're doing the heavy lifting, the kids aren't learning. So now, when kids publish, we say that it's ready for an audience. So at the end of all of our writing units, we have a celebration where the children will either celebrate within the class to class, year 1 to year 1, year 1 to foundation, foundation to 6, parents, and they share their work. It's published. The grade 1s will have errors, but if we correct them, it's not a true representation of them as writers right now. It's where they're at, and we're celebrating where they're at. We're celebrating their attempts. And that's what we've chosen as a school. You may have a different way of going about it. There's no right or wrong on that. It's just really where you see fit and what your school community wants. Okay, the essentials. I've mentioned discipline, and that's just about doing what you say you're going to do when you want to do it. And of course, there'll be those moments where we don't. Don't beat yourself up. We all do it. It's just noticing when it's happening so that you can, build stamina in that area. Creating a plan to build your professional knowledge. Who am I going to read? Who am I going to talk to? Where am I going to go? Who can help me? Modelling. I think many of you out there, the day you don't model what you want and show the kids is the day the lesson goes pear-shaped. The day you model and the kids see it, the lesson doesn't go pear-shaped. And sometimes the feedback we need to give ourselves is, did I model? That's why it didn't work. I modeled. Yeah, of course it worked, because the kids actually saw what I was talking about. It's really important that they can see what we're talking about. A bit like you now, you can see some of the things I'm talking about. Consistent and predictable routines, that works for all children. They know what to expect. There's no surprises. Mentor text. The key to quality writing is to read quality writing. Use your read aloud as a way, familiar text, but there's amazing, amazing books, and you'll have some of your favourites. And sometimes people say, but if I read too much, it takes away from the beauty of the story. You sort of have to have a bank of mentor texts so that you don't do that. What I have that you can't see is I have a bag. It's not really a bag, it's a folder. And in that folder, I've got writing samples. So that example I showed you earlier from the student who visualised to improve his medieval piece, I've got that in there. I've got most of the tools I showed you today from the planning. I've got all of that. So when I am conferring and I want to show a child something, I can go into that folder and say, look, this is what I'm talking about. This is what Aidan did when he wrote about his medieval piece, and then he did that. I had a little boy today writing a poem, and it was about burgers, and his first line was, burgers taste like candy to me. And I said, can I borrow that? I'm going to tell some teachers tonight when I'm talking on the computer, can I borrow that? And I'll put that one in. Struggling writer, disengaged writer, but he had that moment where he got something, so that goes in, and he knows it's in the folder, and he's got that proud moment as well. So my conferring notes, it's just a way of being prepared. As I say, anchor charts I mentioned earlier, it's a great resource. It's all there for the kids. Our teachers use the anchor charts when they've like a post-it, so they've got a post-it of the mini lesson and the strategy that they've taught, and then sometimes the children will go and put their name next to that, and that's the goal that they're working on based on previous learning. So it's a great way of a quick visual, where are the kids at, checking in small group, and you need a process that works for you. How are you going to keep your conferring notes, your formative assessment? We do pre and post writing samples. So before we start a unit, what are the kids showing that they know? What do we need to spotlight? What have they learned? What areas maybe do we need to revisit? And again, keep trying lots of different processes until you find one that works for you. And one more thing, celebrate from time to celebrate. There's two social Facebook groups that I'm members of that I get most of my gold from. And don't try and use too many resources. Just use one, use it well, learn it, move on to your next. If you've got 5 books on craft, pick the one that's best for you and learn that really well. And I think, and there's some recommended ones that I won't go through that might help you with some of the things I've talked about today.
Great. Thank you so much, Lynn. That was really, really practical, and I hope you all got a lot out of it. We've come to the question time. I know we're right on 5:30, so appreciate that some of you will have to leave, but if you do have a question, please stick around. You can write your question in the question box to the right of your screen, and I actually have a question come through during the presentation from Emra, so we'll kick things off with that one. So Emra asks, I have a deaf student in my class and his needs are so diverse. How would I adapt to meet his needs?
Okay, so I'd need to know, does the student have an interpreter? Or I know that some schools have the microphones that are connected to teaching, or the visuals, how much do you use visuals to show? So it's a little bit difficult, but it would be, sorry?
If you'd like, Emra, you can send me an email. My email, just reply to the email that you received with the link to the webinar, and we can follow that up with you afterwards if you'd like. Okay, so we've got a question from Bronwyn, and she's asked, can we get a copy of the slides? We have been recording this webinar, so we'll be sending you a link to the webinar after about 5 working days after the event. So we will send them through to you then. One second.
Okay. Oh, Emma, if you're still there, my school is actually, our language that we teach is Auslan, and our Auslan teacher is deaf, and I think she'd be a great resource for me to follow this up further. So please feel free to email Jill, and then I will certainly get back to you, because it's a really great question, and I'm sure there's other people there that will have similar needs with similar students.
Great, thanks, Lynn. So if there's any other questions, I can see a couple of other people have asked about getting a copy of the slides. As I mentioned, we will be sending you a link to the recording. I can't see any more questions coming through, so I would like to say a huge thank you to you all for giving up your afternoon to come and spend time with us, and thank you very much, Lynn. It was really valuable. All right, off you go. Have a good night.